Welcome to the Awesemo Early Bird Podcast. It's your old pal Emac coming to you with Saturday NBA action one last time with one Adam. Ship my money share because it's baseball season. But not to fear, all you seam heads. We're going to have an 11:15 show with Adam and I breaking down the entire slate for NBA or for MLB. We've got Fast Eddie Fear taking you down the home stretch. He's doing live before lock for this 6-game slate as a solo mission the hour before. And then we also have live before lock for the main slate for MLB. That will be myself and Chris Spags. Adam, I'm kicking off year 30 of NBA fantasy, or pardon me, MLB fantasy in style while I'm still playing college football. I'm so tired I don't even know what I'm doing. College basketball, which Osmo's projections have been outstanding for, by the way. Outstanding. I just make a few teams and I sit back and cash. That's how it always should be, right? And then I'm playing hockey. I'm doing the hockey shows, doing well there. Baseball, oh my God, we've got all sorts of slates and games and showdowns and tiers and all this good stuff. And then you've got NBA winding things down. So we're in the mix. It's all heavy. So we're just going to hit the high notes here on the NBA slate. We know a boatload is always going to change at this time of year, but we'll hit the key players and anything that you got to watch out for. So reminder, if you have not yet signed up for Awesemo, now is the time to do it because the Masters is right around the corner. We've got some amazing golf content. We've got MMA content. We've got NASCAR. I believe it's Bristol, baby, this weekend or next weekend, but there's a contest running all the way through, but not on Mother's Day or Easter for NASCAR because, God-fearing folks are the NASCAR fans. Adam, we've got point guards here. We've got an interesting group of players. You've got some teams that are in the playoffs. You've got some teams that are playing for seedings, and you got some teams that are trying to lose. But Damian Lillard, he's going tonight in Atlanta. Back-to-back for him. He's going to Detroit. He is carrying the load as, amazingly enough, we have the Portland Trailblazers. Wait for it. Last I checked, and I'm looking right now, we're tied for third with the Houston Rockets for the number 3 seed, and without Yusuf Nurkic for the foreseeable future, and without C.J. McCollum, they're going to need to get the 3 or 4 seed locked in so they have a fighting chance of getting out of the first round. Talk to me about Lillard going against a tougher matchup here against Detroit.
Yeah, I mean, definitely a less appealing matchup than Atlanta was last night. No question about that. Back-to-back doesn't help either. But at the same time, you're still talking about, around a 35% usage rate and a near 40% assist percentage without CJ McCollum on the floor. And that's if you ignore Yusuf Nurkic being out because Cantor, is a high usage player. But I would expect Dame to be even a little bit better without Nurkic. So still clearly a strong play, especially in tournaments because of the upside that he has. But there are some other reasonable point guard options. Not the deepest position, but you do still have, on DraftKings, you still have Ben Simmons at 8,400, which is just cheaper than he really should ever be, especially with Joel Embiid out. So, obviously a nice spot for Simmons. You have Mike Conley at just 7,600 taking on Phoenix. So, and, Goran Dragic, playing big minutes now, apparently going against the Knicks. So I don't think that you have to pay all the way up here, but Lillard, clearly has the raw point upside that you look for.
Yeah, and that's definitely the one thing we also want to point out. It is a 3 and 4 for Lillard, but in that first game going against Chicago, they didn't need him. He played a very comfortable 28 minutes, had a poor man's triple-double. Going off the top of my head, I think he had a dozen points, half a dozen rebounds, half a dozen assists. So if he would have stuck around, he clearly would have gotten a triple-double in that one. But you're going to get the boatload of usage without the guys that we mentioned. You can also consider Seth Curry, whose price is ticking up on some of the sites, but he is someone who is a little bit intriguing. You've got Ben Simmons here qualifying now. He's back to point guard and small forward on DraftKings because, DraftKings, but he's in an intriguing matchup here against Minnesota, who's going to be on a back-to-back. Not to bury the lead, but there are 3 early games. There's a 3:30 and 2 6 o'clock games. Those are not on the main slate. We will have projections, ownership, and all the good stuff behind the paywall for Awesemo there. Again, early bird, one word is the promo code. Get yourself 50% off any 1-month package as you're starting out. You did mention Goran Dragic. He's all the way up which is not all the way up, but he's 5,800 on DK. Loving that price point there against the Knickerbockers. And then who's going to get the rest, if anyone? It's Toronto in Chicago. Kawhi got the last game off. Is Lowry getting this one off? And should we look to Fred Van Elite?
Kawhi's listed as out for this game.
Excellent, because, hey, ease into it, Kawhi. This is what it's like playing in Toronto. You only got to play when you feel like it, but when it comes to the playoffs, you better be fresh and ready. But so I guess we are going to be looking at Fred VanVleet, 5,300, not having us do cartwheels, but he should see some serious minutes. He does get a nice boost with Leonard off the court, and he does get some minutes without Lowry. He has hit 35 fantasy points in his last one. He got some mop-up duty there against the Knicks. The two before that, not so great, but they didn't need him because these were just one comfortable win and then one ass-kicking where they lost by 1 point to Charlotte, who somehow is mailing it in, Adam, yet they still might get the 8th seed in the East. Oh, and shout out to our Washington Wizards, who finally mercifully were eliminated officially from the playoffs after their last loss. But talk to me here. You've got Van Vliet, you've got Tyus Jones on the back-to-back, but he's been playing some heavy minutes, and Shaq Harrison all the way up to 6,000. Can we trust Shaq Harrison at 6,000?
Pretty tough to trust Harrison there, but I mean, he is close to a point per minute guy with everyone out for Chicago. So, not the craziest thing, but I don't really see the need to do it, especially when, you do have Tyus Jones in a pace-up spot against Philadelphia playing really big minutes. You have Van Vliet, who's going to need to play big minutes against Chicago. So I would just really easily rather go to both of those guys. $6,800 Kyle Lowry as well, clearly, benefits without Kawhi. So I don't really see the need to get the Harrison, but I do like those three guys.
All right, Dennis Smith Jr. returning, played, I think it was about 15 minutes in his last game after missing the better part of 2 weeks. He's listed as probable. It kind of mucks everything up with him and Moutier, and do we even have status on any of their other guards? It feels like New York is just a pure mess, and they're going against Miami, which is not a fun one. The Knicks are looking to lose. Miami's looking to win because they're trying to claw their way in to the playoffs. Just checking here. Miami currently is a half game ahead of Orlando and a game and a half ahead of Charlotte for that 8 seed. They're 1 half game behind the Nets and 1 full game behind the Pistons. So the last 5 teams trying to get into 3 spots here are separated by 2.5 games in the Eastern Conference. This is going to come down to the wire. So I suspect we'll see a nice showing here from the teams that care, but the teams that don't care, aka the Knicks, feel a little bit dicey as I'm scrolling down the rest of the price sheet here.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, Kadeem Allen, nah, no thanks. Let's move on to shooting guard, see what we can get. How would you consider Seth Curry versus Fred VanVleet? You get about a 10% discount on DraftKings for Curry.
I would rather have Van Vliet. You're talking about a guy who should average somewhere around 0.85, 0.9 fantasy points compared to Curry, who basically no matter who you put on the floor is a 0.7 point per minute guy. So, and it's a more appealing matchup for Van Vliet as well.
All right, and we will have the Fred Van Elite fan club up there. I'm going to have to dial it back. We didn't fill up a 40-man because everybody was ready for opening day baseball. We got to 32. I'll post that on my timeline. We'll probably go with 30 entries. Must fill to run. It's just $1, but it'll be a good time. Looking at some of the shooting guards, I think we need to just step back for a moment, gather ourselves, and launch a 3 because we've got Devin Booker coming off back-to-back 70 fantasy point games, back-to-back 50 and 59 NBA point games. First time, he's the youngest to have back-to-back 50 fantasy point games. First person to do it in the history of Phoenix. The last guy that even came close was Tom Chambers way back in the day, Adam. That was about like 1991 or 2, I'm thinking. And he did back-to-back 40 point games. Booker, we've seen this the last 3 years, counting this one. When they're out, they just let him chuck. I think he's going to be a centerpiece of our lineups, but he's 9,700. Is that doable for us in the 6-game slate?
Yeah, I think so. Memphis is playing faster than they were earlier in the season. They're not as good defensively, and Booker is just out there chucking shots. He's still getting some assists as well, and he's playing huge minutes. So, I don't have no issues with Devin Booker at all.
All right, I want to look up the pace here for Memphis. So they're all the way up to 20th if we look for this entire month. And if we go just to the last, let's say the last 2.5 weeks, I thought they got up as high as 12th. So let's see where they are. They are 15th. So not too shabby considering they've been in the bottom three all season. Of course, they've turned over the majority of their roster. They should have Mike Conley in this one. Of course, you've got DeLon Wright, who is his price is ticking up, and then you've got Dorsey. Dorsey is a much better play when Conley is out. He gets about a fantasy point per minute when Conley's in. When Conley's out, if he's out, get Dorsey in. If Conley's in, I really don't want to go to Dorsey because he drops all the way to 0.7 fantasy points per minute. And I think there are just better options we can go to on this slate. How are you feeling about Dorsey? And have you heard anything about Conley resting?
That's where I'm at as well. There's just enough cheap guard value that I don't see if Conley's in. I haven't heard anything about him resting. I am assuming that he'll play. Bickerstaff insisted that he wasn't resting in those games before, that he was actually hurt. So unless we hear anything, I assume he's going to play.
All right, I'm just double checking to see. A lot of the teams are mostly done now after this weekend with their back-to-backs. Oh, it is actually a back-to-back for Memphis. So they play, let me make sure. Yep, they play on Saturday, and then they play again on Sunday. So just keep your eye on that because you may get surprise value there on Sunday if Conley does play on Saturday, because he won't be rested, Adam. But he may come up with a minor nagging injury. Chicago is the next place we're going to go. It is a potpourri of poo, or the poo-poo platter, shall we say. Is there anybody that you can decipher from this mess that is the Chicago Bulls? Because they are cheap, and they are playing reasonably good minutes. Tougher matchup here against Toronto, but I think they may be some of our value players. Is it a Wayne Selden? Is it a Archidakino? They've got a lot of multi-position eligibility backcourt players here. Anybody in the value column here for you?
Nothing that I really love. Their price tags jump pretty quickly. You should still get plenty of usage and big minutes from Wayne Selden. 5K isn't the end of the world, but when you compare him to, we know we have Van Vliet already. We know that we have Tyus Jones with shooting guard eligibility on DraftKings at about the same price point. So it's tough for me to say I'm prioritizing these Chicago guys anymore. They've kind of moved into secondary play status for me after being, some of the highest owned guys on the slate the last couple times they played.
All right, last guy I'm going to mention is someone to keep an eye on, and this will facilitate our transition over to the small forward spot. Stormin' Norman Powell for the Toronto Raptors has played 25 and 23 minutes in his last two games. He's knocked down 7 3-pointers in those games, which he is wont to do from time to time. But if we have the resting Kawhi Leonard, and if they can get him in for mop-up duty alongside Van Vliet and Jeremy Lin as they should roll in this game, would you consider someone like Norman Powell without any other news other than Leonard out?
I mean, in 150 lineups, sure. I don't think he's somewhere I'd get to in, a handful of lineups.
All right, let's look at small forwards, see what that brings us. Of course, we've got all 3 Philadelphia players here coming in at the highest project. Oh, top 4, Adam. We've got Simmons, Butler, Harris, and Redick all checking in between 48 and 30 fantasy points. They're topping the list. They're ahead of Shaq Harrison, Damian Dotson, and oh, good God, is that Dion Waiters music? Do you like any of these Philadelphia 76ers going into Minnesota, as Minnesota is on the back-to-back on Friday and Saturday?
Yeah, all of them. Embiid being out is just a massive deal for everyone. So, we already mentioned Simmons at point guard, but, Jimmy Butler should play big minutes here and see an uptick in usage as well. Tobias Harris should see at least somewhat of an uptick in usage, and so should JJ Redick. So, out of the small forwards, Butler is my favorite, followed by Redick. But, the whole Philadelphia team, and it's a good matchup, too, against one of the least efficient defenses in the NBA right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And Philadelphia is coming in as 8.5-point favorites. They are relatively secure with the number 3 spot. They're 4.5 games behind the Raptors for the second spot. They're 3 games ahead of the Pacers, who are in the 4th spot. So if they can bank a win or two and then give their guys games off down the stretch in that last week. I think this would be a nice one to take away from a team that's probably fatigued, and we already know they're shorthanded. So that's an interesting one. Who knows what's happening with Josh Jackson? Even if he does play, I'm a little afraid to go to him, only because at this point in the season, why are they doing anything with him? Phoenix wants to lose. You've got James Johnson, who's been playing 20 to 25 minutes here for the Heat, as they're, as we mentioned before, trying to work their way and hold on to one of the final spots in the Eastern Conference. What do you think about James Johnson or any of the other small forward Heat players like Dion Waiters?
Tough to really trust them still. Johnson, I think, probably plays around 28 minutes. 4,400 is a reasonable price tag, but it's not cheap enough for him to really jump to the top of the list for me. So, same with Waiters. Secondary option should play around 32 minutes. Reasonably priced, but not really underpriced either, I don't think.
All right. And then the rest of this is just kind of a mess. Outside of the Philly guys, there's nobody that's really priced very heavily, or pardon me, priced like a premier player. It's a lot of guys with question marks. Andrew Wiggins on the back-to-back. Shaq Harrison gets a little tougher, as we already mentioned, to roll with that price tag. Bruno Caboclo, you're going to want somebody to be out. Kevin Knox, good God, he's with the Knicks. I don't know what's going to happen. So your mileage may vary there. We'll have to see if we get news of anybody resting or anything else that transpires between now and tip on Saturday night. But you do have three solid options on DraftKings there for your small forwards coming from Philadelphia. Moving along to power forward here, we do have Blake Griffin, who is up to, and I say up to because his price is really not crested over the $8,000 mark outside of once in the last 2 weeks. He's coming off 5 straight games of at least 40 fantasy points. He gets a matchup here against Portland right now. With Portland coming in on the back-to-back, we do have a line in this game, and it is Detroit by 5. This is one that Detroit needs to win. Again, they're leading that pack of 5, fighting for the final 3 spots, but they're only 1.5 games out of not making the playoffs. This feels like a spot where the Pistons potentially could tighten their rotation a little bit to assure themselves a win. Do you like Griffin, perhaps Pascal Siakam, Bam Adebayo, anybody at power forward?
Griffin's fine here, but it's just tough for me to prioritize him because you have, Detroit fully healthy, whereas you have Tobias Harris for $1,200 less playing without Embiid. You have Pascal Siakam for $200 less going against Chicago without Kawhi. So I would say Siakam is my favorite guy here. Then I like the discount for Harris. And then, whatever Blake I get, I'm happy with. It's just that I think Siakam and Harris are better plays at their prices.
All right. Yikes. This one drops off quickly as well. Should not be as big of a surprise since there are just 12 teams in action. You get down here to a lot of question marks. You got Kelly Olynyk, you got Hazonia, you got Kevin Knox. Rashawn Holmes is going to come into the equation at 3,800 here on DraftKings. Just nothing else really exciting. Okay. We know Embiid's out for rest. Mike Scott, 3,500. That feels like somebody I'd be willing to roll the dice on. In his last 4 games, he is averaging 25 minutes per game. He's averaging 16 fantasy points per game. Not overly exciting, but at 3,500, and they are road favorites by 8.5 points. No Joel Embiid. We've got to at least give him a nod, don't we, as a potential drop on FanDuel or just a discount dandy on DraftKings.
Yeah, sure. 3,500 is 3,500. It's an appealing matchup. Sometimes Mike Scott makes shots when he takes them. It's not the kind of value play that you're like jamming into lineups and feeling really excited about, but the minutes should be there enough to justify the $3,500 price tag.
All right, last guy to mention, Zach Collins. Again, it is the back-to-back. He has not been playing a ton of minutes throughout the season, but he has been pressed into duty now that Yusuf Nurkic is out. Is he equipped to do battle with Drummond and Blake in Detroit on Saturday night?
It'll depend. That game, the Portland-Atlanta game's at halftime right now, so I don't have a feel yet for how that rotation is looking in a competitive game. It was tough to take too much away from their game against Chicago because it was never competitive. But it'll be interesting to see, how Stott's rotation looks. So that's something that we'll have to, take a deeper look at tomorrow.
All right, that sounds fair. That's also going to bring us to the pivot position here. That would be the center spot. You've got Drummond going against a completely overmatched Portland front court. He is at $9,000 on DraftKings. You've got Jonas Valanciunas, who has been freed, Adam. He has been released from the shackles that were Portland, and he has been playing some heavy minutes in his last, let's just read some minute totals here. This is most recent, last six, starting with the most recent. 32, 32, 26, 41. That was an overtime game. 36 and 29. In those games, he is averaging 48 fantasy points per game. Wow. I'm willing to pay $8,000 for him against Phoenix. And then you've got Karl Anthony Towns, who has just been absolutely phenomenal. Yes, it is a back-to-back for him, but with Gibson out and with the Jeff Teague and Derrick Rose out, not only does he have to facilitate the offense, he has to get all the rebounds now, too. He is still only $10,400. Talk to me about Towns, Drummond, and Joval.
Yeah, I mean, nobody really, without Embiid, there's just nothing to slow Towns down in this Philadelphia front court either. So absolutely love him. Think he's the top center play on the slate pretty easily. Andre Drummond's in a really nice spot. You expect Portland to struggle defensively without Nurkic. The downside for Drummond is that while Cantor does suck as a defender and he's not good in the pick and roll, he's a huge liability there. That's not Drummond's game. Most of his game comes on the boards and rebounding and getting putbacks. And for all of his flaws, Cantor is an excellent rebounder. So for Drummond's game in particular, not quite as appealing as it would be for some other bigs, but still not an unappealing spot by any stretch. His price tag on DraftKings remains too cheap at only $9,000. Vooch in a tough matchup against Indiana, but he's $8,700. Similar to Drummond, really, should just never be that cheap. And then you have Valanciunas playing 31, 32 minutes against a really bad defensively, Phoenix team and front court. So I think those four are where most of my ownership will be concentrated. Towns where I have the money, and then where I don't, just kind of rotating between Vooch, Drummond, and Valanciunas, and giving preference to whichever ones are lower owned if one is projected for significantly higher ownership than the rest.
All right, we've got some nice mid-tier options here. You've got Bam Adebayo is power forward center eligible on DraftKings. He has put up a couple solid games here. You've got Mitchell Robinson. I'm looking for your take there. He's 4,900. Yeah, DeAndre Jordan is lurking in the wings, but Mitchell Robinson is like the new Hassan Whiteside. He dropped 52 fantasy points in his last game. He got a 19 and 21. He almost had a 20-20 against Toronto. Game before that, who knows what happened. He got 14 minutes, 22 fantasy points. Game prior to that, 23 minutes, dropped to 16 and 10 for 36 fantasy points against Denver. And then against Utah, he played 30 minutes, got a 14 and 12 for 40 fantasy points. I'm willing to roll the dice here with one Mitchell Robinson. Thoughts there?
Yeah, I think the price tag it still offers upside. I still don't totally believe in his minutes, but he's been, a 1.2 to 1.3 point per minute guy. So I wish he were power forward eligible because the opportunity cost here is high with, Towns, Vooch, Drummond, and Valanciunas. But amongst the cheap centers, he's my favorite.
All right, here's the question of the night and what will wrap it up for us. Boban Marjanovic, no Embiid. Is he good chalk or bad chalk? Because he's probably going to be popular on this slate. Let's see. His price is $3,500 on DraftKings. Would you be willing to forego a center spot for Boban?
I kind of doubt that he is popular or starts. I mean, Amir Johnson's back. We haven't really seen Philadelphia looking to go to Boban, even without Embiid. If he starts, then I would absolutely have a bunch of him. But right now I expect him to play like 12, 13 minutes, and that's not enough for me.
All right, I think that is going to do it for us. Again, we have all sorts of content waiting you on the YouTube channel. Adam and I will be going through all of the baseball games Saturday morning, starting at 11:15. We'll get in the early ones first, so you can make your lineups before lock, and then we'll be sure, of course, to get through the main slate ones. We've got live before lock for NBA with Fast Eddie Fear, the last hour up until tip-off, and then we also have live before lock MLB style. That will be myself and Chris Spags. That is over on the Osmo YouTube channel. Be sure to follow and hit that notification bell so you know every time that we go live, because good God, we're pumping out on average, 7 hours of content a day this week as we're in the double sports with golf, with NASCAR with the NCAA tournament heading into Sweet 16 weekend. It's a good time. You can follow Adam at ShipMyMoneyDFS. I am at EMACDFS. And of course, it is Awesemo_COM. With that, gamers, good luck.